Welcome to my spell guide for red spells. Before we start, if you haven't already, please join the Throne of Odin Discord. It's a great community and you have great guides like this one, which is the spell guide. Here you can see all the different spells from the 15 base dungeons, including all the uh, class exclusive spells for each one of them, as well as all the spells that you can find in the different seasons. And remember that if you want to farm spell pages for a specific spell, let's say for example that you want to farm Gravedigger, this is dungeon number 8, the Doomhold. If you want to maximize the chance to get Gravedigger pages, the best thing you can do is to select a class that doesn't have a class specific spell in this dungeon. In this example, it will be the Berserker, because as you can see, all the other classes do have a class specific spell. And the second thing I wanted to talk about before I start talking about the different spells is that this is just my opinion. There are many different spells and sometimes you can have very interesting combinations between them. However, I prefer those spells that work most of the time over the ones that require a very specific combination of spells or buffs or debuffs or specific equipment, etc. So let's start talking about the spells. If you don't know what each one of the icons correspond to what spell, the best thing I recommend you to do is just to sort them by alphabetical order, which is what I have right now. It will make it easier to find the spell that you want. So let's start. Anthrite Furnace, 150 mana. It will destroy a number of red gems that depends on the rarity, but it goes up to 12, which is a lot. Remember that when you destroy a gem, it's not completely eliminated, so it disappears. You destroy it from the board, but you still get the mana from them. And you gain 1% power for each red gem destroyed, so you can get up to 12% power, which is not a small amount at maximum rarity. Also 10% chance per red gem to gain a stack of madness. Characters suffering from madness deal 2% extra damage per stack. And if there are 3 or more stacks, then you deal damage to yourself. Oh, great. The game has decided that because I'm I'm recording videos, I'm not really playing the game, so I have to restart. Oh well, okay, let's go back. Now, interesting spell to increase your power, and it's not a fixed amount, it's a percentage, but madness can be very, very annoying. You need to have a way to heal yourself because, yeah, if you have 12 red gems, well, 10 or more red gems, you are going to gain a stack of madness automatically. The additional damage is not that much for each stack, and yeah, you need some kind of healing or regeneration. And if you're playing events or PvP where your final score depends on the total hit points that you have at the end of the fight, or every time you kill an enemy in the case of events, you don't want to lose health. So yeah, interesting, but I think it gets overshadowed by other better spells. Still, if you like to use madness from the season 3.3 temporal machinations, which obviously is where this spell, you can find this spell, and you can also get the Anthrite variant for the Castuli set. That gives you a 5% chance to gain a Stack of Madness and spawn an Anthrite gem, as well as the Guard of the Belligerent, which is the shield for the Ancient Dragon set that also has this variant. So yeah, if you want to use a Madness build, it can be useful. Just remember to have some kind of regeneration, for example, by using a Ouroboros ring from the Serpentine set, like this one. But yeah, maybe you can make it work as long as you don't care about the score in those game modes. Next one is Beam of Light. Destroy a row, deal fire damage plus a percentage that depends on the rarity and goes up to 11% for each red gem destroyed. So a row has 8 gems, and you can have a maximum of 6 red gems without being in a match in that specific row. So yeah, it may deal a decent amount of damage, and it also has the advantage of destroying gems. Maybe if you're playing with the the furnace and with the equipment that you are spawning gems, is a good way to get rid of them. So yeah, interesting spell if you're using an elemental red build, but the damage is not going to be that much at the end of the day. Plus 11% is nice, but with a maximum of 6 gems, and that is the best case scenario, it's not going to deal that much damage. Still, it's not that expensive, it's only 140, so for an elemental build, it can be a useful spell. Next, we have Blast of Corruption, only 110 mana, deal fire damage, and gain Possessed for a number of turns depending on the rarity. Possessed is not the same as Madness. Possessed increases your mana every turn for your spells by a small amount, and it also reduces your hit points. So it has the same effect that if you want to use it for events or for PvP and you want the maximum score, it's not very good. You can use equipment that will give you bonuses when you're possessed, but yeah, you always have that problem of a very niche spell. If you want to use possessed as a buff slash debuff on your build, it can be very good. Otherwise, Burn the Dead, 150 mana cost, deal damage and destroy all skulls. And it will also boost your damage by, boost the damage of the fire damage for each skull destroyed. This is a very interesting spell. So normally when you use spells that increase damage depending on the number of gems of that color, which are the type of spells that I call nuke spells because they deal a lot of damage. For example, in the case of Frostbolt, deals ice damage, adding a percentage for each color blue on the board. For this one, the damage increases depending on the number of skulls, but it also destroys all skulls. So yeah, you can use this spell as a nuke spell if you have ways to generate lots of skulls and then boost the damage with this one. So yeah, it can be an interesting spell to play with, but again, you should use a class that can generate lots of skulls or equipment. There are a few red generic skull generators, but personally, for a pure red elemental build, I prefer the Searing Strike build for the Mercenary, because this is also a nuke spell. It's not as powerful as Nightblade or Frostbolt, but still, at maximum rarity, you can deal a good amount of damage. And obviously, also with this, you can use that spell as well. But you will need to use a very specific equipment combination so you can generate a lot of skulls and then take advantage of that extra damage. The next one is Burning Anguish. Deal fire damage and apply terrors. If the enemy already terror for a number of turns, depending on the rarity, if the enemy already has terror, deal half the damage again. Terror is a debuff that deals additional damage if the opponent is if there are 5 or more purple gems on the board when the opponent has the debuff. This is from season 2.1, the Necrotic Tomes, and here we have 4 spells that work with the terror mechanic. The problem is that in the case of red, you don't have any other ways to take advantage of enemies that have terror, so you will need either to make sure that you have at least 5 purple gems on the board to boost the damage, which is not going to be guaranteed, or use a red and purple hybrid build. So yeah, it's going to be complicated to make it work in a mono red build, but maybe if you're using red and purple, I don't know. The additional damage is nice, but it's not that much at the end of the day. And also it requires the enemy to be already be suffering from terror, either from your equipment or something like that. Next is Burning Hands. This is one of those spells. There are a few, well, not for each element, but for a few elements that deal elemental damage and generate gems or convert gems. In this case, it converts 9 green gems to red and it deals fire damage. I like it a lot. I use it for my Searing Strike elemental build. All in all, very good spell. I really like these types of spells, like for example in the case of blue, we have Cold Snap, deal damage and generate gems. We have Ray of Frost, deal damage and generate gems. In the case of green, for the Shaman, we have Poisonous Toads. Where are you? Right here. Generates gems and deals elemental damage. So yeah, it's one of those spells that are very useful unless you're facing the Fallen Draconus or the I can't remember right now the name. It's a beetle that also reflects elemental damage, but otherwise very good spell. The next one is Cannon Blast. Explode 3 gems and deal fire damage, and it also burns the opponent for a number of turns. Burning, unless you're playing a Warlock, it doesn't deal that much damage because it's just 3% of their current, not maximum, current life. So again, if you're not playing with a Warlock that boosts the fire damage with the Imp gems, Burn is just a drop in the ocean. Exploding gems is always nice, but it's only 3 gems, so and dealing fire damage, I don't know. It can be useful depending on your loadout and what kind of build you want to use, but I don't know how good it might be. The next one is Channel Fire. Each element has one channel element spell that generates that element's color gems. The number depends on the rarity, so at maximum rarity it will generate 9 gems. And then you have a chance to inflict a debuff on the opponent. This chance is 50% plus your spellbook level. Personally, the Channel Fire of the 5 ones, I think this one is the weakest. Again, because Burn, unless you're playing a Warlock, is not going to deal that much damage. And you have other ways to generate gems, like I said, Burning Hands. All in all, interesting spell still, because it doesn't deal damage, so it's good again if you're playing against the Fallen Draconos. But yeah, the burn effect is very underwhelming unless you're playing with a Warlock. And if you're playing with a Warlock, I would recommend to play Dark instead of Red, because the Warlock Dark spells are so much better. Next one is Corrupting Light, and this one transforms yellow gems, or converts yellow gems to corruption gems and heals you. Converting gems is good for generation, but again, red has multiple spells that can generate red gems. And healing is usually not very good unless you heavily invest in your hit points, which means that you're not investing in your armor or maybe your resistance. Yeah, it can be useful when you start in the early to mid game, but in the late game you're not going to be able to out heal the damage you receive, so not that useful. The next one is Fireball. Oh, pretty easy. Deals fire damage and removes green gems. So if you just want a direct damage spell, it's very cheap, only 110 mana, so great for a position 4. And yeah, just pretty straightforward. Next one is Gravedigger, and Gravedigger is an excellent spell. Destroys a column of gems, is a random column, you cannot choose it, and it has a chance to destroy a second column, and this chance depends on your spellbook level, and it's 25% plus your spellbook level, so it maxes out at 75%, and it generates skulls depending on the rarity. And this is a great spell if you're playing a monochrome red physical build or a rainbow build. A lot of players use Gravedigger in a rainbow build because it doubles down as a skull generator and a mana generator with the destroyed column. It's also a safe spell if you are playing against the Fallen Draconos because it doesn't deal elemental damage. So all in all, if you're playing a physical build, excellent. Additionally, as I mentioned before, with Burn the Dead, you can use both spells together. Use Gravedigger first to generate some skulls and destroy a column, which is also going to generate more gems, well, increase the number of gems that you can have on the board by destroying some of them, and this one after that, so you can get the extra damage from it. So both, if you want to use both spells together in an elemental build, or if you want to use Gravedigger in a physical build, excellent spell. Next one is Meteor Strike for 145 mana. Deal fire damage and destroy a column of gems. And for each red gem in the column, add a percentage of damage. Yeah, this is one of those that each column can have a maximum of 4 red gems, or well, gems of any color, if they are not matched. So 35% sounds like a lot, but it's limited by only 4 of them. Yeah, it can be useful. Yeah, one of the multiple uh, spells that generate that deal elemental damage and can destroy some gems. So in certain builds it can be useful. Rage of the Ram. It deals fire damage and it has a chance to stun the enemy. The chance depends on the rarity, but it maxes out at 7%. Yeah, it's very cheap. It's only 105 mana. It deals a decent amount of fire damage for this very low cost, but the chance of stun is almost non-existent. Next is Scorching Ray, another gem generator. In this case, and this is very interesting, it converts all blue gems to red. So maybe it can have very good synergies if you're using multiple colors, or if you're using a spell that can generate blue gems, because or just sometimes there are lots of blue gems on the board. And it also has a chance, and this chance depends on your spellbook level, and it's 10% plus your spellbook level, so it maxes out at 60%, to generate extra red gems. And because it doesn't deal damage, it's also a safe spell to use against the Fallen Draconus. Interesting spell. Again, I do use it going back to my red elemental mercenary. As you can see, it uses Searing Strike, obviously for the big hit, and it uses Burning Hands, Scorching Ray, and Channel Fire to generate as many red gems as possible, so it can boost Searing Strike damage. So yeah, another red gem generator, very interesting one. Next, we have Strength to Power. This is from the current season, 4.2. It destroys Skull Gems and gains power. The destroyed Skull Gems still hit on that round, and it's a great way to boost your power, similar to other spells that you have in other elements. So, for example, Climb the Peak, if you're playing purple, is a similar spell that will boost your power. And because power feeds itself, so your elemental damage for your spells increases as your power increases, each round you use it is going to further increase your power. And the number of skull gems that you are destroying is pretty good. And again, this is going to give more gems that will fall from the top of the screen. So for only 110 mana, yes, a very, very good, very interesting spell to use and quite powerful. It just released in the current season, so I don't think it has been used that much, but it has a lot of potential, I think, in the future that hasn't been used yet because it's only been around for the last month. Next is Summer Rain. For 140 mana cost, burn the enemy for 6 turns, or well, for a number of turns depending on the rarity. If they're already burning, reduce their armor and resistance by a certain number, plus 20% for each turn they are burning. Again, burn, as I said before, unless you're playing a Warlock, is not very powerful. Reducing armor and resistance sounds very good, but it doesn't deal any damage if the enemy doesn't have any armor and resistance. So yeah, it doesn't generate skulls or gems or anything like that. So just for the burning effect and the armor and resistance reduction, I don't think it's that good. And as I said before, burning is very good with the Warlock, but purple Warlocks have much better gear and spells than red ones. Red ones are viable, you can make it work, but yeah, I don't see burning being that good. And finally we have Wall of Fire, very cheap, only 100 mana, and it increases resistance and fire resistance. Generally speaking, I don't like resistance that much. I prefer builds that can kill before your opponent is able to cast their spells, because in the early and mid game, yeah, you can take some spell damage and survive. In the late game, when you're facing level 100 or even higher than that, up to level 200 events enemies, they're gonna one-shot you. Even if you have your fire resistance at 80%, it is very likely that they're going to one-shot you. It can be useful in PvP if your opponent is using an elemental build, like for example the one I showed you with my red Searing Strike mercenary. But yeah, I don't think it's that useful. If it was armor, I think it would be much better, but just for resistance, thanks but no thanks. And that's my video about the red spells. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.